Toolbox is a resource for preachers and small group leaders. The passage we are looking at here is Mark chapter 16, verses 1 to 8. The world has been turned right side up, and the last have become first, and they will be entrusted with the resurrection message. And Mark's story of discipleship continues. Immediately there's a contrast between Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome on the one hand, and Joseph of Arimathea on the other. On the Friday, Joseph, a wealthy man and a powerful man, bought linen and bundled Jesus' body in it, and hurriedly put Jesus away before the Sabbath. That's the correct sense of chapter 15, verse 46. The woman bought spices, and they go to anoint Jesus and to give him a proper burial at the very first opportunity. They're not sure how they're going to get it right, but they're going to go and try to do what is right anyway. However, the tomb is open, and as they enter the tomb, the symbolism in the passage kicks into high gear. The young man sits at the right-hand side. It's a symbol of the true power of solidarity. It was the position of authority for which the male disciples competed in chapter 10, which the psalmist attributed to the Messiah in chapter 12, and which Jesus attributed to the fully human one in chapter 14. It's the position assigned to the bandits in chapter 15. And the young man is wrapped in a white robe, and he brings to mind the other young man, similarly wrapped in cloth, in chapter 14. That story showed the shame of the community which had abandoned Jesus. And here perhaps the community of witnesses is restored with honor. It brings to mind Jesus being laid in the tomb, and perhaps the Transfiguration story as well, where God settled the Son of Man or revolutionary Messiah debate in chapter 9. For the early church, white clothes were always the symbols of the martyrs. And this young man brings a message from God, and so it's right to call him an angel. But his authority comes from being one who picked up his cross and followed Jesus, willing to lose his life that he might gain it. The women are deeply troubled. Those words are only used in 3 places in Mark's Gospel. Here, in the public reaction to the Transfiguration, and in chapter 14, where it describes Jesus' struggle to come to terms with his own pending execution. The woman, Jesus, and the crowd are all troubled when faced with death. The young man knows that they seek Jesus, and knows not only that he is crucified, but also that he is risen. He has been raised. He is not here, and perhaps most importantly, look, he is not where the authorities laid him. The authorities have not had the final say after all. Jesus has been raised, a word that brings to mind all the earlier healing episodes and confirms for the reader that this is not the end of the story. The story begins again. Get up, tell his disciples and Peter. The community fell away in 2 stages and is now being restored in 2 stages. He's going before you. So keep following. That's a fulfillment of the prophecy in chapter 14 and echoes other passages as well. But more importantly, they're going back to where they first met Jesus. The story that appeared to have ended is beginning again. The story is circular. Knowing and following Jesus hadn't resulted in triumphal victory as the disciples had hoped. It wasn't the restoration of the Davidic kingdom as the rebels had hoped. It wasn't the tragic failure and defeat that the reader might have feared. It has resulted in nothing more and nothing less than the regeneration of the Messianic mission. If we have eyes to see, we will see Jesus going before us. The invitation via the young man to Galilee is the final call to discipleship. And it rightly evokes both hope and terror. Terror because this is a martyr figure, but hope because where he was once the symbol of shame and abandonment, here he stands, honoured in new clothes. The women embody that ambiguity. Terror and amazement seizes them. All through the Gospel, those who have been told to say nothing have spoken. But what is happening in this final betrayal? The woman, the only disciples who are left, are fearful And rightly so. The martyr figure tells him to start the journey again, to return to the beginning of the story. And we should be afraid if we take that invitation seriously, because Jesus calls us, inviting us to come with him and lose our lives. The author leaves us with the problem when the gospel ends mid-sentence in verse 8. There's unfinished business to complete. The open-ended story can only be resolved in doing, in practice, and the decision is ours. What are we going to do? Will we follow Jesus, or will we flee? The story cannot resolve that for us. It can only be resolved in our historical lives and moments and choices. Whether we see Jesus depends on whether we renew our commitment to the journey and return to the start again. In chapter 9, verse 10, the disciples held fast to his word, but discussed among themselves what is the meaning of resurrection from the dead. And here at the end of the story, we found ourselves in exactly the same position. We don't understand exactly what resurrection means, but we can hold fast to what we do know. That Jesus still goes before us, that Jesus still calls us to the way of the cross. That's where the gospel according to Mark ends. Not with tragedy, not with victory, but with an open-ended, unending challenge to follow Jesus once again. And we must respond.